Hey everyone, it's lovely to see you, those names that I do know and those that I don't. Thanks so much for joining us. I put a little sort of, I've got arts. If you're looking at my screen right now, so you can see that I've got getting that arts grant because it's significantly different. And for those of us who belong to the Surf Coast Shire, I'm really focusing in on arts grants. So that would be through the seed fund or something like that, because I'll say it up front now before I go any further, they're considerably different. And if you're going for a small grant or a community grant with the Surf Coast Shire, that's quite different. The steps are the same, the way that you articulate your project and everything, but when you're going for an arts grant, you really are looking at the practice of making and what your mark has been in your field. So without further ado, we'll skip through. Okay, I'm screen sharing. Look, already I'm having tech difficulties. There you go. So you want to get that arts grant. I have this face on because my first question that I would really think that it is a good one to ask is why? Why do you want that arts grant? What's the primary reason? How much can you apply for? And what outcomes does the grant expect from you? Because ultimately you need to ask that question, is it worth it? And the reason why I say that is because if you're going for a small amount of money to help you put up an exhibition to pay for printing costs or something like that, etc., you do have to really stop and think, how much is this small amount of money worth to me in the long run? Because grants always come with conditions, and that's the key thing that you're actually thinking about, or what you should be thinking about when you first start thinking, I want this grant. So we'll move on to the next slide. If the answer is yes, and it is absolutely, sorry, I'm just skipping back for a moment. So if the answer is yes, and that you still think that it's worth it for you to apply, then the next thing you need to do is to recognise that you treat it like an application for your dream job. It's not something that you leave until the last minute. So obviously we've all done that, and sometimes it's worked. But if you really are going for a grant that you want seriously, put in the time and effort, because it's really worth it. And it comes down to some quite key things. It's a professional pursuit. Even if you don't consider yourself a professional artist yet, the application has to be professional, because the people who are looking at it are professionals in that area. So before you begin, you need to think, take down the guidelines, get a copy, download the guidelines of the grant and download the criteria, etc., and analyse it. And as you're doing that, jot down any questions that you have. So for me, when I'm doing a grant, and I've actually pitched this workshop more from the perspective of me as an arts, as an artist, as a writer, and someone who sort of applies for funding in various ways, rather than someone who now works for local government, because that's the space you need to come from. So when I am going for a grant, I print up the guidelines, I sit there with my pencil, my pen, I'm an avid annotator. And if that's not your style, I really want you to get into that thinking when you do begin to think about applying for grants, because you read through it, you underline things you don't understand, and you write whatever your immediate thought is. If you think, oh yeah, I can do that, because just jot a note in the margin, because that's going to be really helpful for you as you go forward. Answer the question for yourself, what is the funder looking for? So we often go into these things, oh, I want money for this or for that. It's definitely where I started my arts grant journey. But I had to quickly understand that actually, as much as I want money for something, and I want this organisation to give me money to help me do this, I really need to be aware of the fact that they're asking me for something. They're looking for a particular, there's something that they're looking that's quite particular from the grant application. So first thing, look at the criteria or the obligations. Can you meet those? Would your project meet those obligations? And how can you meet those? So for example, with, I'll use the Arts Development Seed Fund, because some of you might be familiar with that. With our Arts Development Seed Fund, it's not a bad little grant. It's up to $5,000, but there are quite specific criteria around it. And those criteria around this year, it was around creative action for the climate emergency. So we really wanted people, we wanted artists to stop and think, what sort of creative action through art making can I help generate in the community to spread this message in regards to the climate emergency, and what is my particular take on that message? And then you think, so how will my work meet those obligations? The next thing to think about is, you know, this project officer. You'll see them, they've got every single grant that you go for, you'll have the project officer's name listed, their email and their phone number. It's not there, you know, it's not there because they think it's a, you know, oh, you're going to be a pain in the butt if you ring and ask questions. They're actually there, and I promise you, because I've been a project officer for quite a few different arts orgs over the years, we're really keen to know what sort of projects you're thinking about, and, you know, to help get people get their work out there in the public domain. So if I know you a little bit personally, if you've rung me once or twice or 3 times and discussed your project with me, and we've talked about the criteria around the grant that I'm running, I'm going to know you. So when your application comes in, and because you've talked to me and we've shared ideas and things, I will have set you straight on some areas. I will have said, actually, that's a really fabulous thing, extrapolate on that more, etc. So I will have a better idea of your project, and I can share any details that the assessment panel are looking for. And assessment panels do reach out to project officers and say, can you tell us a little bit more about this? So it's really good to know the project officer, and just they're really keen to speak to you. They're people who have a really big interest in the arts. They, you know, they're doing what they do because they really want to see the arts be valued at a greater, you know, a greater level. So we want to see people's projects get up, but we, you know, like you have, you know, parameters around you, we have parameters in that those projects need to meet certain criteria. Take notes, and I suggest you should, you know, okay, I'm a writer, I take notes avidly, but I really do, it's a good thing to take notes around these things. Don't just file it, take notes. If the project officer says anything that you think, oh, I didn't understand that, question and question again. Or if they spark something in you that you hadn't thought of, take notes, because you can use that little spark that you've got in that discussion to make your application stronger. And then ask, and look, not all organisations will do this, but do ask whether that project officer would be willing to look at a draft of your application for you, and up until what date. I can't, you know, I really can't say this enough, but that's what the project officer is there for. They're there. We want to see this funding go out, you know, whether it's Surf Coast Shire, whether it's the City of Greater Geelong, whether it's Creative Victoria or Australia Council, or any of the other organisations that have arts grants, etc. We want to see that funding go out. We want to see that money get out into the community so that artists can actually practice their work. So we want to know what it is that you're actually up to. Okay, so it sounds a little bit like doing schoolwork. It is, you know, like the best job applications are those ones that you do and you do and you do again, and you get, you know, several key people who have a really critical eye to look at your application and to question you about it, and to, you know, say, oh, well, perhaps you could, you know, enlarge this, or there's too much waffle going on here. Okay, so I believe my internet connection is unstable. I'm really sorry, everyone. If I get bumped out, I will come back in as well, so bear with me. Okay, so you know, keeping to this schoolyard theme, or school, you know, classroom theme, mind map what it is that speaks to you about the grant that you're going for. So if you're going for COVID relief funding, either with Australia Council, City of Melbourne, etc., look at their parameters, look at their guidelines, and just start throwing ideas down on paper so that you'll start to see little clusters of things that join together. And more often than not, those things will start to form themselves into paragraphs. You'll see links and you'll be able to make those connections. think about what is the driving force behind your application. I'm going to be really upfront. You know, I'm really speaking to you as a you know, an artist rather than a bureaucrat. Money may well be the driving force behind it, but you do have to couch it in terms that's going to appeal to the funder. So everyone, what I was saying was about taking those notes, and actually, where was I up to on my little PowerPoint?
You should be able to share screen now.
Yeah, about mind mapping, okay? So what evidence, you know, if we're looking at COVID relief funding, what evidence can you demonstrate regarding loss of sales, commissions lost, etc.? And grant bodies, we like evidence, you know, it helps us justify the funding that we're giving out. So percentages of sales lost, dollar figures, you know, if you've lost commission, you can make a good, you know, a good estimation as to what your income has lost. Obviously, round it up, you know, and put that in, because that's the sort of evidence that people are looking for.
Harriet, I'll get you to share your screen again too.
Thanks, darling. Okay, so bear with me, everyone. I'm just in a different little space right now. Stace, I'm sort of lost. Where have we gone? There we go. Okay. I'll be with you in a sec, everyone. Okay. So yeah, what evidence can you demonstrate? And then what will you use the funds for? Now this question, it's about you and what you need the money for, obviously, but you need to tie it back to the work. So how will the funds benefit your work in the short time? So your overall creative practice. And for some reason, can you see my screen, Stace? I'm thinking.
Yes, I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're looking good.
Thanks, darling. It's not clicking forward. There we go. Okay, so how will this benefit your work in the short term? And how will the funding benefit your work in the long term? So again, you know, I'm talking about COVID relief funding because I know that a few people have applied for it at various levels of government throughout the country. And there is actually some COVID relief funding that's coming from Surf Coast Shire too, so please keep an ear out for that. But think about how does it benefit your work in the short term. So if you were going, you know, for example, we've focused this entire last month on helping artists transition to a digital space, because we knew that this is, you know, that was something that was going to be really vital to help people to continue to raise income, etc. So how will the funds benefit your work in the short term? If you're going to invest more money in transitioning to that space, getting a really great website up and going, getting some more marketing experience, you know, promotions, etc., then that's going to benefit your work in that term. But the long term, what it does is it's building your whole body of skills. So you can really argue quite strongly that this is going to set you up to be an independent practitioner, despite issues like COVID that might actually come up. And then you have to think about the next level of benefit too, and that is particularly when you're funding at sort of the state level, how will the funding benefit the sector or your community? And that's, I mean, I'm unstable again. I'm really sorry. As I said, for local government or state government funding, how will it benefit the sector or your community? So it's about thinking, you know, it's about looking at the ways the arts work. So whether it's about building connections, helping people to share experience, helping people to sort of tell stories about things that have occurred, all of those things, they bring wide community benefit. And if you reach out to people, you know, that project officer, etc., or other people, you know, who work as, you know, professionally in the arts, we can start to drill down into some of that evidence for you and say, look, this demonstrates that this is of benefit to the community for these reasons.
Okay, so we've lost Harriet again altogether. We might see if we can get her back just on audio only. Sorry, everybody. We blame Geelong's bad internet. Now, just to make sure I've got everyone else there, I'm assuming everyone else is there because I can all see you there in my list.
Oh dear.
Should we try just having voice only, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Just do your presentation.
Yeah, without me on video. Sure, good idea.
Yeah, we'll try. We'll go as minimal as possible. See if that works.
So I've just skipped a page, and now I'm not sure because I'm in screen share, darling. I can't see anything. Okay, so bear with me, everyone, while I stuff around. What I was saying, while I try and get back my own thing, was about scheduling. Now I'm trying, Stace, to shrink. There, I've shrunk. There we go. Okay, where are we?
Now I'm assuming if I stop your video, I'm not going to get rid of you altogether.
Yeah, please stop my video.
No, I did get rid of you altogether. No?
Did you? Oh, I'm still here.
But now I need you to present your screen.
Oh, I know, and I cannot. Everyone, I'm really sorry about this. Isn't it interesting that it's me in Heighton who can't be seen? I don't know how to present my screen, darling, because I'm actually in. Oh, I have to press escape. Sorry, everyone. Okay, so more. Can I share if I'm not on video?
Now I'm going to make you. I'm worried if you can go back to. I wonder if can you see the plain Zoom screen?
Good idea. David Graham said email your presentation to Stacey. Good idea. Okay. Oh my goodness. All right. Everyone, I'm a bit
Gretchen. Sorry, I was laughing at Gretchen's comment.
Gretchen, yours should go much better on Thursday. Okay, Stacey. I'm going to talk.
There's Gretchen having a little chuckle.
Yeah, well, Gretchen will feel much better after this. Okay, Stacey, I've just sent that through to you. So everyone, I'll just keep talking a bit. I was talking about scheduling and how important it is. So yeah, as someone who's received many grant applications and has written quite a few, etc., and I'm sure that Gretchen, who's one of our grants officers at the Shire as well, and she'll be giving the how to budget for grants workshop on Thursday. I'm sure she's had the same too. You know, we get these people who ring us on the day before or something, wanted letters of support for an application for, you know, I don't know, Creative Victoria, Australia Council or something. It's too late. There's multiple reasons why it's too late, but you really should have been talking to everyone that you want to get support from very early on. So if you say, oh, I want Harriet to write me a letter of, you know, support for an application for Creative Vic, I would love to do that for you. I really love to see people get their work out there and to get support for it. However, you need to be able to tell me the submission deadlines. You need to give me time because there are certain amounts, particularly at local government level, if you're applying for a particular amount, say over sort of 20,000 or something, that means that someone like me, who's just an officer, can't sign it. It has to be, you know, has to be given the right permissions from the council itself. So we need weeks of lead time. And I know that places, you know, other government organisations are the same. So you have to schedule that time. And if you're like most of us and you have children and you have a life, etc., get going on it a couple of months before the deadline and always be thinking in advance. You know, Stacey said on Thursday night in regards to the fact of getting a residency, you should be looking at those spaces. If you're thinking about grants, you should be looking at those spaces that tell you what grants are out there and apply and thinking about things at least 6 months in advance, because that way you're going to be able to really make your application competitive. So as I said, if you want letters of support, make contact ASAP with the people you'd like to write them. Tell them what it is that you're applying for. the submission dates, and what you would like them to focus on in their letter. And look, a lot of people who are really busy would really love you to write them a draft of that letter, and then they can edit it for you. So, you know, leaving you with that. Now, I've just lost the screen, but I can look at it.
Okay.
No? Thanks, Stace. You're wonderful.
Are we on the right screen? That's what I wanted to make.
Yes, we are. And
Okay.
yeah, so look, I'm doing my mum and my school teacher thing again. Don't leave this looking for, you know, support from letters to support, etc. Don't leave it. You know, you need to give people at least 3 weeks before the submission date to get those ready for you. Obviously, you know, I'll stay up until midnight and write you a letter, you know, if I think that the project's really worthwhile, and if I think that you really have thought it through yourself, but for whatever reason it's got late, you know, and you know, I will help you if I can. But if I know that someone has not, and I think, to me, I feel that this is quite standard amongst those of us who work in this space. If we know that you're just sort of coming in at the last minute, unless it's a bloody brilliant idea, you really can't make yourself competitive. Stace, can we go to the next screen, please, darling?
No worries.
Thank you. So look, you know, you have writers behind the scenes at Portal, and the thing about grants as opposed to the visual arts, for example, is that what you're trying to do is to get your point across in the written form. And so it comes down to editing, just like you practice and practice and practice whatever your visual arts or theatre, you know, practice is, any of those things, just like you perfect your craft, you have to see this application in terms of that as well. Don't give us a whole lot of guff about, you know, the emotional space around it or something. So the best thing I think that you can do, and everyone that I know that, you know, is successful with grants and things, we write and then we edit. You know, so the beginnings, and it's the same thing for writing. If you're a writer, you know, you're writing novels or whatever, the beginnings, the first drafts are often too long as we add in all the detail that we know about the idea. You don't need all of that detail in the final draft, but you have to, it's that something about sort of, you know, spewing it all out to begin with, and then refining and refining and refining, going back and looking at those criteria, looking at those guidelines and going, oh, okay, I can make the link between what I'm saying I'm going to spend the money on and their guidelines and their criteria much more strongly here. So like in sculpture, it's like carving back the extraneous material to find the shape beneath. Press enter, please, Stace. So, you know, speaking at it from a writing point of view, established writers often ditch at least the first chapter of the first draft. If writing is not your thing, then make sure you're leaving even more time for editing. So you will get there. It's not hard, but it is something that takes practice, and you really don't want waffle, because those applications that come in with really succinct, concise sentences that sum up quite concretely what it is that you're going to be doing are the ones that stand out to people who are funding. Hit enter, Stace. So editing, though, obviously isn't just about taking things out. It's also about adding detail where it's needed. So once you've read through your application a few times and you keep cross-checking back to those criteria, etc., then you go, oh, look, I haven't really addressed this. They say that they, you know, the part of the criteria is this. How will I address that in this work? So add that detail in and take other detail out. Next slide, please. So rewriting. At least 80% of the work in any written document is in rewriting. Next point. So you've got to learn to love them. It's how you improve the ideas. It's how you really get closer and closer and closer to what it is that you want to say. So get excited about finding a better word to describe something or coming up with a more concise sentence. The other day, Stace was talking about writing your artist statement. And, you know, we're not born with words like, you know, I don't know, gestural viscosity or something, you know, like we're not born with these phrases, but you start to learn them the more you read and the more that you write. And those, you know, and really trying to find words that hit for you what it is that you do in your artistic practice. So get excited about finding a better word to describe it. And we're going to keep going into the language, you know. Keep going, Stace. Sorry. Yep. So it sounds hideous if you're not a writer, but making lists is a useful way to come up with more interesting ways to describe something. And another thing I'd recommend here is if your work is similar, you know, think about an artist whose work speaks to you, or a writer or performer, etc. Think about that artist whose work speaks to you and who you know, part of you goes, I'm really aiming in that direction, and have a look at the way they write about themselves, have a look at their artist statements, their bios, etc., and look at the language they use or that is used about them and their work. Next point, please. So adverbs, you know, every English teacher's sort of worst nightmare after primary school, they're mostly used to prop up dull verbs and they don't ring true with readers. So, you know, and in good plain English, concise language, we'd say that at least 90% of them are unnecessary. Next point. So take the time to put together a list of verbs about your practice. And, you know, that can come when you're actually practicing. Like, I think if you use a sketchbook or anything like that, just scribbling down words, when you start to see what sort of, you know, physical, you know, reaction you're having with your work, or the way that you're engaging with your work, or the ideas that are really exciting you, note them down and put together a list of doing words about how you're doing that. Next point. And then the same thing with a list of adjectives, a list of describing words. Those words, you want to be able to find a few key words about your practice that really sum it up quite strongly. You're never going to have many words to play with. So you want to familiarize yourself with the language that we use around the arts, around particular practice, and then what works best for you. And the more that you play with it, the more that you play with your artist statement, etc., because all of these things help you put together your package. So your artist statement, once you have one that you like, you know, you will be adding to it and changing it, and it will morph with you as your practice does. But if you keep that up to date, then that's already there, and that describes what sort of an artist you are, and that's going to help inform your grant application as well. So start getting these things together like little tools, you know, and having them there. A really good artist statement, a good bio, and start thinking, you know, identifying what is, you know, what your practice is and what differentiates it. Next point, please. So the first words on each list, if you're doing these lists, and they become less onerous. It becomes less of a hideous chore, I promise you. The first few words on each list will be the most obvious. So try focusing your attention further down the list and choose those that ring most true for you. And you'll find that you'll be able to pick a verb and an adjective, and that they'll be beautiful together, and that they describe you quite uniquely. Next page, please. So before you write your grant, learn to walk before you can run. Next point, clearly and concisely articulate your project. The who, that's you. The what is the project? Where are you going to do it? When? And why are you going to do it? And that why is really important. If you're not, you know, if those things, you're not aware of those things, then that's what you really have to focus in on. Next point. So once you've looked at, you know, this is what my project is, and I want to do this with who at this time in this place for these reasons, then you start drawing those links between your project and how it meets the grant objectives. And then you're coming back to that mind map that we talked about earlier. You know, you've got all of these points up on the paper. You can see the grant there in the middle. What are the links? How does your project, you know, in COVID recovery, for example, how would your art work, or your whatever it is, your piece of theatre, etc., how would that help the community rebuild and reconnect and process what COVID has been? Start thinking about that. And then use dot points in your application. So you might have 400 words. I think 400 is a pretty standard number of words that you'll have to describe a project. You don't need to use all of them. And if you spend a lot of time out in the sort of airy-fairy, waffly ideas around, you know, the state of the planet, etc., it's really hard to come in and be quite concrete about what your project is. So again, I come back to that point about most writers ditch you know, the first chapter of a book, you're probably going to find that you might write 800 to 1,000 words for your project proposal, and then you're going to whittle it back because you're not going to need those words. Okay, next point. And then order the points logically. So start with the big idea. You know, you can see the finished project and then telescope into the important details. You know, you come in a level. This big project is supporting the community in this way. You come in a level. This project is going to allow me to get my, you know, kickstart my practice again after it was shut down by COVID through this, etc., etc. It's a logical progression. Make sure it's logical and that you could actually dot point all of those things if you wanted to, because that's going to show you if the progression is logical or not. Because if it's not making sense to you and you're inside the project, you have to be able to step out and say, how on earth is that going to make sense for someone else? Next slide, please. Okay, so project plans and titles. Right, you know, but for your plan, you start from the end date. So if you're looking to you know, have a major retrospective in May 2021, that's what you want the money for. You want to help, you know, buy yourself some time to, you know, look through your entire archive, to identify the key themes that perhaps you hadn't seen before, and to make some sort of meta-narrative, etc. So you're starting with the opening date. So everything that has to come before then, you then work backwards. And just make it very clear, you know, like projects, the biggest projects start with, you know, the tiniest steps, and it's one step after another. And then leave the title. You know, you might have a working title that completely changes before the end, but do remember that the title of your application is going to be, the title of your project is going to be the thing that the grant team first, the assessors first read. And if it can grab them really strongly and quickly, and if they can keep it in their head because it's succinct and clever, you know, you want your ideas, it's your project you want floating around in their head, not someone else's. So next slide, please. Yeah, so look, I'm telling you now, your resources at the Shire are Terry Hannon. She looks after our community grants, and she's an incredible font of knowledge and will spend a lot of time with you. So at the first, you know, I did differentiate and say that this was about arts grants, but our community grants at the Shire, there's some fabulous things that you can do with those grants. There's been a lot of arts and culture activity come through that grant round, and it's not as rigorous around the artistic process, etc. It wants, what our community grants want to see is how your project, how your arts project is going to bring benefit to the community. And look, you know, I'm not the person to be, you know, debated with around the benefit of the arts to the community. I think they're so enormous. So if you're struggling to work out how your project is of benefit to the community, please give someone like me a ring. You know, so for example, if you were going for a community grant, you'd speak to Terry, but then you might want to speak to me because, you know, I can help you with that sort of evidence. And then of course there's me. So I'm the Arts Development Officer. We have an Arts Development Seed Fund that's an annual fund. It's just actually, it closed about a month and a half ago, and we've just now about to release the information about the people that were awarded that grant. And also Lynn Hume, she's one of our events officers. She's another person who is heavily involved in the grants. And of course, Gretchen, who you'll meet on Thursday night if you're coming to the budgeting workshop. So I'm keeping away from the budgeting. Ultimately, for smaller grants, it's fairly straightforward, but Gretchen is the gun in that area, so she'll take you through that on Thursday night. But I really can't emphasize enough how important it is that your work, that your application is really clear and it's strong, concrete ideas. I know in the arts we tend to, you know, we're about emotions and feelings and the way that, you know, those less concrete areas, but at the same time there's been a lot of work done over the sort of past you know, 50 years talking about the benefit of the arts. So that concrete stuff is there, and you need to be able to articulate, you know, really clearly what your project is. Move away from the waffle. Clearly, you know, state this project. I'm going to be doing this with these materials and these people for these reasons. I'm quite happy because we obviously lost me in there, and it's all jumped through a bit more. So I'm actually quite happy now because it's been quite haphazard. If anyone would like to ask me questions now, because you know, if I've missed something because of my problems with the internet, it seems to be okay without my face on the screen. So please ask away. I'm just going to look down here at the little chat function. So I'm not sure if I can still see the chat function. I'm actually not sure that I'm even here anymore. Stacey, am I here? No. I am apparently. Good, I'm glad I'm here.
Sorry about that. This presenting and doing multiple things at once is, yeah, I finally found the chat.
Thank you very much.
Gina has asked, do you have any advice specific to collectives or groups applying for grants?
Yeah, it's Gina, it's an interesting question because it really depends, I think, on what the project is. So, for example, if you were, you know, an artist-run initiative or something like that, then it'd be one way. Can you give me a little bit more information? I think, I mean, I think in regards to that, you know, generally theme-specific applications are really good. And, you know, if that collective has had any runs on the board in any way, then you want to be working with that. And that's another thing. I think, so I started this before I lost, you know, connection the first time, talking about, is it really worth it to you? Because I've seen a lot of people who, you know, like it's a lot of work. I'll tell you a little anecdote. So I thought it would be worthwhile getting paid to write a novel. So I went and got a PhD scholarship, and let me tell you, that was not worth it. No, it was just the enormous amount of work that I had to do outside of writing the novel itself was far too much. It really wasn't worth it for the money. So I think if you're a collective or a group applying for a grant, you want to have a really good sense of your unique identity as a group. And you want to be quite specific about what it is and where it's going to take that group, how it's going to help that group evolve, and how that is going to then play back into the community or into the sector. So without any sort of more detail, Gina, that's about what I feel I can say there. Another thing I want to say is I'm a member of a writing fraternity, we'll say sorority actually, and for example, someone was talking about, you know, Art Australia Council grants. Now, you have to be really realistic about the fact that every level of funding to the arts, you know, both federal, state and local, well, not locally, federally and state, has been cut drastically in the last decade. So if you, you know, if you're going for an Australia Council grant, for example, I was just in a chat with Melissa Lukashenko today, who won the Miles Franklin last year, and she's very aware of the fact that 12% of applications to the Australia Council get through. And we're talking about a Miles Franklin winning author. So if you're applying, you start where you're at. So you don't, you know, if you're an emerging artist, don't go for the big sort of, you know, career defining grant with a huge grants body. Start more modestly and build up a collection of, it's really good to be able to say in your bio, you know, has won this grant, this residency, etc. So I've got from Fifi that she's never applied for a grant. Where do I find the list release of grants? So again, if it's in the arts, you'd be really good to subscribe to Creative Victoria. So that's just Creative Victoria. They have they do, you know, e-newses, etc. And also Regional Arts Victoria. Regional Arts Victoria they're actually one that's great to to join, just because they'll keep you abreast of everything that's going on. And if you guys, as much as we're only down the road from Melbourne, really, we're still considered one of those regional shires. So you've got access to all of the grants that are out there because we're considered regional. So if you're rural, I definitely would be saying to you, look up Regional Arts Victoria. So they will, there's funding there for a variety of works in any discipline. Creative Victoria, obviously, they do some fabulous initiatives. And it also depends on your art form. So Writers Victoria, they've got grants as well. It's really up to the individual discipline. In textiles, interesting. I think I reckon your best bet would be with Regional Arts Victoria to begin with, and also maybe through Craft Victoria, just seeing, because all of those organisations, they are very aware of what's going on in which particular field. Yeah, I was going to talk a little bit about residencies as well. Yeah, as Stacey said, you really should be looking to apply for residency at least 6 months in advance. So you can wing it, you can luck it, but really, again, they're highly competitive, but they're fabulous. A residency, to me, if you want to buy yourself some time to focus on the work, a residency is an extraordinary thing. There's some incredible residencies in this country for writers, for visual artists, for performers, etc. And all of this information, you can get in contact with me, but sign up to Arts Hub. They have a weekly e-news which will tell you things like that. Sign up to your sort of peak body organisation, whether it's in literature, visual arts, etc. Not sure if there are any more out there, but I will say again, if I'm given enough time, if your grant application is for another body, I don't care. I'm here to represent you. I'm here to support you and your practice in the show. So I'm very happy to read your grant applications. I'm a writer. I will go hard on it for you because it needs to be. I've sat on many panels, grant assessment panels, etc. And we can all be incredibly moved by our own work, and I'm often incredibly moved by lots of people's works, but it's as much as the arts is often about the feels, it's about the emotional impact and things. When it comes to grant applications, you really need to leave that to the audience to work out whether they're feeling good about it or not. It's a fine line, and I come back to that word professional again. And yes, support is there. Just give me a heads up, give me enough time, because my job is a little bit crazy at times. Give me enough time because I'm really happy to go through it with you. Okay, so newly formed ARA of emerging artists just beginning the process of applying for funding. Okay, so I reckon, Gina, it's about getting runs on the board. So, and that's another thing, earlier on I said, don't apply for grants if you really don't think that it's going to be worth it for you. But it's an interesting sort of play between having those things on your bio and it being worth it to you. I think for many visual artists, for example, if you've got, if your stuff is out there on Instagram and stuff and you're selling, you more than likely don't need a grant, but they do look good. It does help get your name out there. So it's a play that you need to sort of think about and go, okay, what are the pros and what are the cons? So newly formed ARI. So ARIs are very close to my heart. I'm going to be really honest and say, Gina, though, that the fund, it is a really, really difficult funding area right now. And Creative Victoria have done some wonderful things in the past few years with the small regional transformations grants and with the Creative Places grants that they had last year. There is hope. There was hope that those Creative Places grants would become at least a sort of biennial thing, but I'm not sure now that COVID has happened whether that will happen. But Gina, do feel free to come to my Tea Station chat on Friday. We can chat a bit more. I think it's about, the first thing to do is to build presence, to know who your artists are, who are helping run the ARI, and know what they're, what is the you know, who's got a, you know, whose profile, like whose profiles can you be leveraging off, and how do you talk about the strength of what you're putting together and the importance of it, and also at the same time balance it with the fact that it's, you know, it's an emerging practice, etc. So you can definitely do it, but it's a matter of sort of balancing all of those things, and that's where you want to talk to a project officer. Okay, my dears, 8:22. I do want to thank everyone. I know that there's been a lot of people who have done all of these workshops, and your feedback has been incredible, and it's just been so great for me and Stace, because you know, we sort of went, okay, bang, we're going to put this program together because we want to do, you know, we really want to give people some things that they can work with at this time to help shore up their practice. So it's been fantastic to see, you know, repeat offenders throughout a lot of the, you know, the entire series and stuff. I've got a cheat sheet for you in regards to, you know, applying for grants, etc. And it really is, it's all of that stuff. Check the criteria, check the deadlines, etc., etc. It's all that stuff that, you know, we probably should have learned at school, but I didn't learn until, you know, I was well into my 20s. So it's that basic stuff, and it helps people. Very happy, as I said, to talk further about it with you on Friday in my Tea Station chat. Otherwise, it is, look, I do hope it's approachable, everyone, because it's not actually that frightening, and until you start doing it, people don't know who you are. So you're more than likely going to get knocked back. And it's good to start at the level of local government, I think, because that gives you, you know, it's more approachable. Actually, I will say though, both Australia Council and Creative Vic and Regional Arts Victoria are so approachable. They're incredibly lovely, smart people in there who are passionate about the arts. And it's our job, all of those project officers, it's our job to help you understand how to navigate this. And we understand better than most people exactly how decimated the sector has been over the last 10 to 15 years in terms of funding. So we're really keen to help people get whatever funding is there, and we want to see it used and used well. And it's about, you know, the first time I applied for a residency, I just did it really to support that PhD application I was doing, and I ended up getting it. And that, you know, that off the back of that, you know, is where you start. Off the back of whatever the first thing is that you get, that's where you start leveraging it, and you know, your name becomes better known. So I'm getting some lovely messages. Thank you very much.
Safe enough to put your video back on, I reckon, Harriet.
Oh, you reckon? You can see me?
I'll put your video on to say goodbye.
Oh, so everyone, you're lovely. You're all lovely, aren't you? Oops, I don't know where I am. I can't see myself at all.
You are there now.
Am I? Hello.
Yes, I'll stop sharing. There we go.
Yeah, look, as I said, we're really happy. I'm really happy to talk to you about your grants. I'm going to throw Gretchen in and say Gretchen is also very happy to talk about your grants. And we're also, you know, I'm really happy to talk to you and to edit your grants and stuff for other organisations as well, because I want to see more people, more of the incredible artists that we've got across disciplines in the Shire, you know, putting their hand into that funding bucket, you know, that bigger funding bucket outside of the Shire as well. So I don't know. I think that's probably about it. What do you reckon, Stace?
I think so. And yeah, don't forget, everyone, you can join Harriet again on Friday at the Tea Station at 2:30, and you can ask her all of the questions about your specific projects you like. But yes, I think it is an important message to say that, yes, we'll take advantage of the resources available to you, your local arts development officer. And,
hey, Stace, when's your Tea Station? Just interrupting you.
My Tea Station will be on Wednesday at 2:30.
Okay, everyone. So look for those beautiful artist statements, etc. Do join back in with Stace, because yeah, it really is. It's like little building blocks. You get a great artist statement, you get your bio, and those things. That's two of your, you know, your little sections of a grant application.
Yeah,
you know, and start believing those things about yourself as well. So on that note, I'm just reading messages still.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Yes. And see you later in the week, hopefully.
Yes. All right. Well,
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Thanks again. Bye.